Welcome to Semiconductor News Decoded. I'm Ty, with 31 years inside the semiconductor industry, bringing you the real view from the factory floor. Today's topic, India's Assam State Semiconductor Factory is expected to begin production within this fiscal year. A nation famous for writing recipes is finally building its own plates. As always, I'll explain everything in the most simplified way possible. Even a middle schooler should be able to follow along. If you're a specialist watching, some parts may feel oversimplified, but I'd like to prioritize giving everyone the big picture first. Think of it as a country that's always written the menu, finally deciding to make the dishes itself. So sit back and enjoy. Here's today's news in one sentence. A country that's always written the recipe has finally started making its own plates. India is a country that excels at writing recipes. Just as Indian chefs lead menu development at famous restaurants around the world, Indian engineers are at the forefront of semiconductor design globally. But the actual kitchen, the front-end manufacturing facility, and the plates, the back-end finishing factory, have always been handled by other countries. India, which has relied on foreign countries for both cooking and plates, has now decided, let's at least start making our own plates. That's what this news is about. The bar for building a plate-making facility is lower than setting up a full kitchen, so starting there is a smart move. The location is Jagadhri, Assam State. Starting with what you're good at, a solid, pragmatic first step. But building a plate factory isn't the end goal. What really matters is what food will be served on those plates. In other words, can they get customers to say, please put our dishes on your plates? Factories are only profitable when they're running. No customers means losses. The key players here are partnerships with major smartphone makers, local automakers, and India's own domestic demand. When all three align, this factory becomes a very compelling story. From here, let me explain how this simplified analogy plays out in the real industrial world. Let me summarize the recipe and plate stance. The stage is Jagadhri, Assam State in northeastern India. After a meeting between India's Minister of Electronics and IT and the state's chief minister, a statement was made that production is expected to begin within this fiscal year. This has put the project back in the spotlight. The investment scale is approximately 270 billion rupees, roughly 350 billion yen, making it a major project. And honestly, my current position on this semiconductor factory is almost exactly the same as this recipe and plate story. To understand this project correctly, you need to grasp the structure of India's semiconductor industry. India has long had overwhelming presence in semiconductor design. Engineers of Indian origin are deeply involved in the design teams of global chip giants like Qualcomm, Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. But when it comes to manufacturing, that's a different story. Virtually all of it has been outsourced to Taiwan, South Korea, and China. What this Assam project is targeting is the back-end process, known in the industry as OSAT, Outsourced Semiconductor Assembly and Test. This involves packaging chips in resin, testing them, and shipping them out. The barrier to entry is lower than front-end processing, where circuits are etched onto wafers, making it a rational starting point for India to build a manufacturing foothold. There's a reason I support this start with back-end strategy. OSAT is a utilization rate business. It's not enough to install equipment and build a building. You need to keep product flowing through the line continuously. That's where profit comes from. Many operations turn unprofitable when utilization drops below 70%. It's a tough business. That's exactly why deciding what to run before the factory starts is so critical. There's a notable development worth watching, the Qualcomm partnership. Qualcomm is the top maker of smartphone chips and has publicly stated its commitment to strengthening ties with India. If Qualcomm builds a framework to run products through this facility, the factory's credibility jumps significantly. Being known as the place that makes Qualcomm products becomes a magnet for other customers. Another key factor is automotive components. ROHM, a Japanese electronic components maker, has been showing interest in India. ROHM has strong capabilities in automotive-grade components, such as power semiconductors. Automotive parts have high-quality requirements compared to consumer products, but once adopted, they're used in large volumes over long periods. That makes them well-suited for building the factory's mass production muscle. The third key factor is India's domestic demand itself. Automakers like Tata Motors are seeing rapidly growing demand for power semiconductors and sensors amid the EV wave. Having a factory within India makes it an attractive option for manufacturers looking to avoid geopolitical supply chain risks. Locally sourced is a competitive advantage that goes beyond price competition. When these three elements come together, gaining credibility through the Qualcomm partnership, building mass production capability with automotive parts like those from ROHM, and capturing domestic demand from players like Tata, this factory will transcend being just a policy project and start functioning as a real industry. Conversely, if any one of these is missing, there's a real risk that utilization rates won't hold and the operation will struggle. Let me also touch on the broader flow of India's semiconductor policy. Over the past several years, India has been advancing a national program called the India Semiconductor Mission, building a system of subsidies to attract manufacturing sites. Multiple projects are running in parallel, including a Gujarat factory tied to a Tata Electronics and PSMC partnership. The Assam project is part of that, but overcoming the geographical disadvantage of being in the Northeast is also a challenge. Let's also check the infrastructure side of Assam in the Northeast. Logistics infrastructure and stable power supply are the lifelines of semiconductor manufacturing. Currently, Assam lags behind India's major cities in terms of infrastructure readiness. However, the Indian government is also investing in developing infrastructure in this region, and the investment decision appears to have been made with future improvements built in. Let me also put the timeline in order. The statement said production is expected to begin within this fiscal year. But launching a semiconductor factory involves steps: equipment delivery, installation, testing, and production trials. From on-the-ground experience, I believe there is a significant gap between production start, as defined, and stable mass production. Being able to ship the first lot is different from operating commercially at a consistent profit. This point will need to be watched carefully as more details emerge. The key takeaway from today's news is that India is trying to build an industrial foundation, starting with the back-end process, OSAT, of semiconductor manufacturing. India has led the world in design, but manufacturing has been outsourced abroad. The Jagarod Assam project is a 270 billion rupee initiative, expected to begin production within this fiscal year. Success hinges on whether utilization rates can be maintained, and for that, three factors matter: building credibility through a Qualcomm partnership, establishing a mass production base with automotive parts, and capturing India's domestic demand. Infrastructure and timeline uncertainties remain, but the strategic direction makes logical sense. Here's my overall read. The strategy of start with back-end, grow through domestic demand is rational from a factory floor perspective. Since OSAT is a utilization rate business, you need a stable customer base running volume products first. With India's auto market electrifying rapidly, if the factory can lock in major domestic customers like Tata Motors, its revenue base becomes significantly more stable. The final piece, in my view, is India's own domestic demand, especially in the automotive sector. And here's what I think is really important. India's long-term goal isn't just to make plates. I believe India wants to build the kitchen next, front-end manufacturing, and eventually move toward vertical integration, covering everything from design to production. India already has strong design talent. That pathway is realistic. Today's step is the entrance to that long journey. That's all for today. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis. So if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Ty on Semiconductor News Decoded.